President Trump on his way overseas for a very ambitious 5-city, 9-day foreign trip covering everything from Middle East peace to the fight against ISIS. Many believe the trip could offer the White House a chance to reset from waves of negative media coverage driven in part by turmoil, and also perhaps even have a positive impact on the Trump big domestic agenda. Joining me now to discuss more on the president's first foreign trip, Gina Loudon and Paul Botticelli. Paul, let me start with you. A very ambitious trip, a 9-day trip covering 5 countries, the 3 centers of the world's largest religions. What do you make of its scope?
I think it's a great scope. It's the kind of trip he should do. It's a shame he has to do it to get back some of the momentum, but I think he will. And you can see the hand of people like General McMaster, as well as the president. They're thinking broad. They're thinking strategically. They're thinking about America's alliances and how to position ourselves in ways that help us in terms of security, but also economics. So I think it's a very good thing for the president, even if it comes at a difficult time. Although,
Gina, some are saying, you know what, maybe it comes at precisely the right time, getting away from the U.S. press, allowing his own agenda here at home to breathe while he makes new friends and strengthens relationships abroad.
The man knows focus, Charles. I mean, let's look at the history he has. He's run a business. There have been constant distractions. He knows how to deal with the distractions. And this is part of the magic of what I think is Donald Trump. You know, people will criticize him for lack of experience in politics, but he perhaps wins each time over whatever weaknesses might be displayed just because he knows things like how not to be distracted by media leaks and other things that he knows good and well are not an attack on him. They're an attack on the American people. So he's out there doing the work of the American people.
But Gina, what do you think, though, could happen overseas during the trip that could change the narrative even at home, even against the media that we know launched the war against Canada Trump a long time ago?
So many things. I mean, like was mentioned, you know, meeting with religious leaders that he's been accused of being somehow bigoted against, you know, proving to the whole world that he's going to go out there and do things that are material like Obama really never did. I think Obama went to be wined and dined and maybe play a little golf. But I think this president is very serious about moving his agenda of, you know, improving the business climate in the United States and reforming trade and reforming our entire you know, standing in the United States. So I think that's what he'll do.
You know, Paul, to that point, President Trump going with 25 business leaders in a variety of business industries. I don't think a lot of Americans know we actually went to a trade surplus with Saudi Arabia last year. There's a lot of room for growth with us there. And so I think, for one thing, if you're talking about an economic agenda with America first, we're going to come away with some pretty good deals from this trip.
Oh, no question already. And as you know, there are CEOs from some of our largest corporations are already there. They're on the ground before the president gets there. They're working deals. This is the scope of the president's view that not only does he need to put the United States back in the leadership economically and in terms of security in that part of the world that Obama had made our name really a pariah among many of those people. He gets the TV image. He gets the longer story that will come after this is that this is an administration on the move. Yes, there have been some hiccups, but the administration is on the move. That's what he's going for, and I think this is a great way to do it. And I give some credit to his national security team, too, as well. I think General McMaster has been a real help in putting this together.
You know, Gina, from the optics of President Obama's first visit around the world, which, let's face it, was an apology tour. It was filled with a lot of bowing, and subsequently it was followed up by policies that put Iran over Saudi Arabia, the Palestinians over Israel, and turned upside down long-term relationships that we had, and many people believe made it a very unstable region even more dangerous.
I think that's such a great point, Charles. This is going to be the contrast opposite of that. This is going to be about America positioning again from a position, bargaining again from a position of strength. This is going to be about America first. But that doesn't mean that, you know, this is President Trump. Let's not forget, this is the master negotiator. He knows how to go over there and talk to world leaders and tell them what's in it for them and negotiate that deal that is best for both parties. I think it's very telling, Charles, that the moment he got on that plane to go there today, way the New York Times and the Washington Post saw fit to leak a new fake news story, I think that tells you how threatened they are by the fact that he's making this trip right here, right now.
Yeah, to your point, the typical 5 o'clock bombshell came about an hour and a half earlier. So,
Exactly.
Paul, I want to ask you about that, Paul, because you would think at some point maybe the American public may start to turn tone deaf to some of these things because they're all steeped in anonymous sources or phantom memos or just not corroborated by anything beyond conjecture.
Right. No, I think that's right. I think the public is going to, probably already is, tired of unnamed sources, people reading letters they say other people wrote to other people into a reporter's telephone. For most Americans, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And if the president has forward momentum on economic deals, on security arrangements, his critics have got to reevaluate him. He is understanding the way to put the United States in leadership with Muslim nations in a way that makes us more secure because he's actually getting them to do the things that he was saying in his campaign we need to see. So I think the American people will see that this trip has a real possibility of being a big success for him.
Paul, let me ask you, you talked about the White House itself. Are some of the issues involving President Trump just a function of him being a businessman, not a professional politician? Yeah. And a world of really, let's face it, rattlesnakes, where at the end of the day, most of them are out only for themselves, even when you think they're on your team.
No, it's exactly right. And I think the president's experience in business has stood him well, particularly in New York City, has stood him well for a lot of things. But one of the things that he and his team are getting used to is that there are enemies everywhere, even for reasons you can't understand what their opposition is. It's ideological, it's emotional, it has nothing to do with profits. And that's just something for them to get used to. And I think given the circumstances he came into, they're not really doing as bad a job as they could. It could be a lot worse. And I think the learning curve is in their favor, particularly with a trip like this and getting the investigation about the Russia collusion off the front page. Right. As much as possible.
Gina, I want to invent something called the Never Trump meter, because if I had invented it right after the inauguration and his joint speech to the joint session of Congress, you would have had that Never Trump meter go all the way toward, well, now we're on board. Now we're on board. In the last 2 weeks, it has gone decidedly back to the other direction, where a lot of these folks are now coming back to their original positions, and they're hammering President Trump as much as the mainstream media, as much as Democrats, Republicans or others who never wanted him to be the sort of standard bearer for the party. And are you worried about that having as detrimental an impact as all the other things that the president faces?
No, I'm not, because I think they've discredited themselves over and over again. I think the American people are looking at things like 400,000 jobs created last month at 4% GDP, at their country feeling safer and better economically than it's felt in years, about the optimism and the hope that's out there, especially on the economic front, but even on the foreign policy front. And I don't think that they're going to pay. I don't think the average person cares all the intricacies with Comey and these. I don't think people care about that. I think people care about what's hitting them at home when they get home from work every day. And they're going to start taking note as our economy continues to improve. And that's the real traction that President Trump has that the media seems oblivious to.
Yeah, there's no doubt that optimism polls continue, to remain extraordinarily high, whether it's small business, consumer poll, or some of the other polls out there. Nevertheless, we saw the market have a hiccup this week, a really big hiccup that was on front pages of a lot of papers. So you had people who aren't necessarily in the markets paying attention, and often that's looked at as some form of a proxy. So again, having said that, how critical is it that President Trump come away from this 9-day trip looking presidential, bringing back some tangible goodies and being able to say to the world, hey, I did it. I represented America and I did an amazing job and I put us first by the same time?
Yeah, I think it's very important.
Well,
the market's down for the week. It's come back some, but it is down for the week. I think what you say, Charles, is exactly right, but I would add something else. I'll be a little worried if the president does not go on the offensive and stay on the offensive, have the cabinet out there. Mnuchin was out talking about tax cuts. Everybody needs to be on the offensive because the communication from the White House going forward needs to always be about trumpeting things that he's doing and achieving. And I think they can do that. There's no question he wants to do that, and I think we're going to get better from that.
Real quick, Gina, please.
Yeah, but I think on the other hand, too, if the media on the left decides not to cover it, I don't think it matters as much because I think people select their news at this point. They're much more intelligent consumers at this point, and I think people are going to try to find out, hey, what did Trump do on this tour if the media decides not to cover it by and large. So I'm not so sure it matters what's covered as much as what he accomplishes while he's there.
All right, guys, thank you both very much.